Welcome to today's deep dive. We're stepping back in time to 16th century Spain to uncover the story of Ana Maria de Leon, your 12th maternal great-grandmother.
Fascinating era, to say
Oh,
the
yeah.
least. Full of cultural shifts, historical transitions.
From what I'm seeing in this document, Story of Ana Maria de Leon, my 12th maternal great-grandmother, written by Paul Elms Bacardi. It looks like we're talking silk traders, whispers of the Alhambra, and a life that crossed borders. You ready to unpack this?
Absolutely. Let's dive right in.
Okay, so the story starts in 1587 in Granada. Not exactly the Spain we picture today, is it? What was it like back then?
Think of a city steeped in contrast. You had the grandeur of Moorish architecture, the Alhambra, a prime example, a visual reminder of Granada's vibrant past. But at the same time, Catholic Spain was consolidating its power, bringing with it sweeping societal and religious changes. Imagine the tension as these forces collided, shaping daily life for everyone, including the De Leon family.
Wow. I hadn't considered the impact of those changes on such a personal level. It's no wonder this time period is considered such a pivotal moment in history. The document mentions the Morisco Revolt of 1568. Ana Maria would have been a young girl when that happened. What a time to grow up.
The Morisco Revolt really underscores those tensions simmering beneath the surface.
Right.
Remember, this was only a few years before Ana Maria was even born. So this wasn't just some distant historical event. It was a lived experience. It would have left its mark on the city and its people.
Right.
The revolt itself centered around the Morisco population, descendants of Muslims in Spain, who often faced pressure to convert to Christianity. While the revolt was ultimately suppressed, it serves as this stark reminder of the clash of cultures and faiths that really defined this era.
It makes you wonder what it was like for those families, the ones caught in the middle of all that. The document really emphasizes the De Leon family's Catholic faith. Was that common in Granada at the time?
While the document does focus on their Catholicism, it's important to remember that Granada was still incredibly diverse at that time. Even after the Catholic monarchs retook the city, many people continued to practice their own faiths and traditions, in secret, of course.
Right.
This wasn't some black and white society. It was full of, hidden complexities.
Fascinating. Okay, so the document mentions that Ana Maria's father, Juan, was involved in the silk trade. What can you tell us about that world? It's not every day you hear about silk traders in 16th century Spain.
The silk trade in Granada, it was actually a direct link to its Moorish heritage. For centuries, Morisco artisans were renowned throughout Europe for their exquisite silk craftsmanship. Think vibrant colors, intricate patterns. These silks were a hot commodity.
Wow.
It's really no wonder that Juan de Leon was drawn to such a prestigious and lucrative trade.
So this wasn't just a job for these families, it was a source of pride, tradition. Did anything threaten that way of life?
Well, by the late 16th century, the Granadan silk trade was facing some hard times. Increased competition from other silk-producing regions, along with, shifting trade routes, meant that families like the De Leons were facing a very uncertain future. Imagine that weight of uncertainty, generations of expertise, tradition, suddenly hanging in the balance.
That's a lot of pressure. No wonder this next part feels so significant. At just 18 years old, Ana Maria and her family pack up and leave Granada, heading for Lisbon, Portugal. That's a huge decision. What prompted such a dramatic move?
While we can't say for certain, it's probably safe to assume that the declining silk trade played a major role in their decision. Families like the De Leons would have been looking for new opportunities. And Lisbon at that time was a beacon of prosperity. Imagine, this wasn't just moving to a new city, it was stepping into a whole new world.
Okay, let's talk about that new world. What was Lisbon like compared to Granada?
Picture this. Lisbon, a bustling port city, on the rise, bursting at the seams with explorers, merchants, goods pouring in from every corner of the globe. It was a stark contrast to the fading grandeur of Granada. Lisbon was the vibrant heart of Portugal's expanding empire, full of potential, but also teeming with new challenges, especially for a family adapting to a new language and culture.
Talk about a culture shock. Did Ana Maria and her family find their footing in this new and exciting city?
Well, there's one key event that unfolds in Lisbon that sheds some light on her life. Her marriage to Fernando Almeida.
Her marriage. Okay, we definitely need to hear more about that. We're back with a deep dive, and I'm really curious to hear about this marriage. At this point in her life, Ana Maria is still so young. What can you tell us about her husband, Fernando?
Well, Fernando Almeida was a Portuguese merchant,
Uh-huh.
a fitting match for someone from a family steeped in trade. While the document doesn't go into specific details about his personality, we can infer a lot from his profession and the context of the time.
What kind of things can we infer? Were marriages back then purely practical arrangements, or was there room for love and, personal choice?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
While societal expectations played a significant role in 16th century marriages, it's a bit simplistic to view them solely as, loveless transactions.
Right.
It's more nuanced than that. Remember, marriage also represented a merging of families, a strengthening of social ties, and a path to security and stability, especially for women in those times.
That makes sense. I guess it's easy to project our modern values onto the past, but it's important to remember things were very different back then.
Exactly. Now back to Anna Maria and Fernando. This marriage, it really paints this vivid picture of cultural merging. Here we have a young woman, newly arrived from Granada, marrying a Portuguese merchant.
Yeah.
It's like a microcosm of the broader cultural shifts happening in Lisbon at the time.
Their story kind of becomes a symbol of Lisbon's evolution into this diverse and cosmopolitan hub. It's amazing how these personal stories offer these really powerful glimpses into the past. Okay, so we've talked about Lisbon as this booming port city, but the document also emphasizes the importance of faith for Anna Maria. How did those two worlds, bustling trade and religious devotion, coexist in 16th century Lisbon?
That's a great observation. And it's important to remember that Lisbon at that time was under the rule of Philip II of Spain, a devout Catholic monarch.
Right.
So this wasn't just some subtle influence. Religion permeated every level of society, shaping everything from daily life to, grand political schemes. Even though Lisbon was this international melting pot, the church remained a powerful force, setting the moral compass, influencing social structures.
So even amidst all that trade and cultural exchange, faith still held this central place in people's lives.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating to consider how this whole backdrop might have impacted Anna Maria. Here she is, adapting to a new city, a new language, a new way of life, and faith likely served as this constant thread connecting her to her upbringing, offering a sense of familiarity amidst all the change.
Yeah, it makes you think about the things that we rely on for comfort and stability during times of transition. Even today, those kinds of anchors are so important. But let's go back to the challenges she might have faced. Even though both Spain and Portugal were Catholic, I imagine there were still cultural differences to navigate.
Oh, absolutely. We can't underestimate the adjustments she would have faced. Language barriers, different customs and social cues, even seemingly small things can feel significant when you're in a new environment. And remember, Lisbon, as a major port city, attracted people from all walks of life, from different faiths, different backgrounds, a true melting pot.
It must have been overwhelming at times, especially for women back then. From what I've read, their lives were so different. What were the expectations and opportunities like for someone like Anna Maria in 16th century Lisbon?
You're right to highlight that. In 16th century Lisbon, women faced considerable limitations within a patriarchal society.
Right.
Their lives were largely confined to the domestic sphere, revolving around family, child rearing, and managing the household.
Yeah.
Educational opportunities and economic independence were, for the most part, out of reach for women.
So very different from the world we live in today, but within that context, were there any glimmers of agency for women?
Well, it's important not to romanticize the past or downplay the very real constraints women faced. It's crucial to avoid generalizations. Women were not a monolithic group.
Right.
We know Anna Maria came from a merchant family, and it's plausible that women in such families might have had, a bit more leeway, perhaps even participating in the family business behind the scenes, of course.
Okay. So maybe a bit more room for influence than we initially assumed. It's fascinating to peel back those layers and uncover the complexities of her world.
Precisely. And it makes me think about the fact that this document, the one telling her story, even exists at all. Women's voices from this era are often lost to history, their lives relegated to the footnotes.
That's a great point. We're lucky to have this glimpse into her world.
Absolutely. And we can thank Paul Holmes Picardi for taking the time to research and compile his family history, preserving Anna Maria's story for future generations. It makes you wonder how many other incredible women's stories are out there just waiting to be discovered and brought to light.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about kings and queens. It's about the countless ordinary people whose lives intertwine to create the tapestry of the past. Anna Maria, with her journey from Granada to Lisbon, her marriage to Fernando, her resilience in the face of change, she embodies that idea perfectly.
It really makes you think about the ripple effect of like individual choices, doesn't it? Here we have Anna Maria making this momentous move to a new country, and that decision goes on to impact generations of her family.
It's a powerful reminder that history isn't, some abstract force. It's made up of countless personal stories, just like Anna Maria's. And her story, in many ways, reflects broader historical patterns. Think about the shifting power dynamics of the Iberian Peninsula at that time, the merging of cultures, the enduring influence of faith. Anna Maria's life, though unique to her, becomes this fascinating window into a world in flux.
It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, using her story to understand the bigger picture of that era. And it makes me wonder about the legacy she left behind. Did they stay in Lisbon? What happened to her descendants? That's where it gets even more interesting. The document actually traces Anna Maria's lineage down through the centuries, highlighting how her family tree branched out across Portugal and beyond. Her descendants went on to make their own mark, carrying with them the threads of her story. The echoes of Granada, the bustling energy of Lisbon, the enduring strength of their heritage.
It's incredible to think about how her journey from Granada to Lisbon, a journey made centuries ago, still resonates in the lives of her descendants today. Talk about a lasting impact.
It really underscores the interconnectedness of our shared human experience. Anna Maria's story might seem like a small thread in the grand tapestry of history, but it's threads like hers that weave together to create the rich and complex world we live in today.
It's a reminder that we all carry within us the stories of those who came before us, their choices, their challenges, their triumphs. They've all shaped who we are in ways we might not even realize. Expert speaker, what's one thing you hope listeners take away from Anna Maria's story? What can we learn from her experience?
If I had to pick one thing, it's this. History isn't just dates and names in a textbook. It's the collective story of humanity, full of individual journeys, cultural intersections, and the enduring spirit of those who came before us. Anna Maria's story reminds us to look beyond the surface, to delve into our own family histories, and to recognize the powerful legacy that lives within each of us.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we wrap up our deep dive into the life of Ana Maria de Leon, a woman who, through her personal journey, offers us a glimpse into a pivotal moment in history and reminds us of the enduring power of individual stories.